Hello, my name is Egle, and this is a podcast, Dialogues, that is produced by Klaipėda Social and Psychological Support Center. This time, I want to invite you to a dialogue with Alyssa Ahrabare. She's a feminist activist who has over 7 years of experience working with advocacy in NGOs and networks to promote equality between women and men at a national and European level. She's an advocacy and legal officer in European Network of Migrant Women, a vice president of a French coordination for the European Women's Lobby, and a co-president of the French Organization of General Interest, Osez féminisme. With all that extensive experience of Alyssa, today I invited her to podcast to share her expertise and knowledge on the pornography and its relations to human trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Hello, Alyssa.
Hi.
So you are working on advocacy in European Network of Migrant Women for quite some time, and you work with topics such as prostitution, pornography, male violence against women, migrant women, specifically focusing. I want today to talk to you a little bit more about pornography and its connections to human trafficking, or more specifically to trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation. And my first question would be, how does pornography contribute to the trafficking and sexual exploitation of individuals? Can you elaborate of any patterns or trends that actually link to the two of them?
Thank you very much. So I would start by stating that in the pornography industry, there is a lot relying on sexual exploitation in the same way, the same functioning as the prostitution industry. So it's basically commercial sexual exploitation. Why I'm saying this? Because first of all, recruiting methods of the pornography industry are very similar as the prostitution system. So first of all, the victims, the women who are targeted by the industry, they are targeted based on their sex. It's mostly women, but also based on other factors such as their vulnerability, their young age, their economic situation. So usually it's women who don't have a lot of money. They may need to find an income. Sometimes it's also women who are isolated. They don't talk to their family anymore or something like that. And so due to these vulnerability factors, there is likeliness that they would fall into sexual exploitation. So this is the first common trait. Then still in terms of recruiting methods, when they have targeted the person, we are going on a trial in France right now, legal proceeding against a major pornography platform, which is called French Bukkake. And so the trial will take place in 2025 normally, but the proceeding has been going on for a few years now. The investigation is over, and the charges that have been retained are pimping, trafficking, rape, aggravated rape, and other charges. There are 50 women who are civil parties, so they are identified to be victims. And basically what was highlighted through the investigation was that the recruiting methods are based on deception and grooming. So for instance, in some cases, there was a man working for the website, the pornography platform, that had a fake profile of a woman. The name was Axel. And so he would target the women that I described before online, acting as a peer and manipulating them into gaining their trust. Until then, he would advise, oh, you have money problems, so you could do escorting. I do escorting myself. It's very safe, blah, blah, blah. He would send them to a meeting with the client. And actually, he would be there and he would rape this woman. And so this is a very similar strategy as they have in the prostitution industry, where they traffic women and then they put them into maison d'abattage, we say in French. It's like some houses that they have, especially in Eastern Europe, where the women are raped several times with a lot of violence, and then it creates trauma for them. It creates dissociation. And so they are even more vulnerable to exploitation and violence because it becomes harder for them to fight for their rights because of the violence they have experienced. So these are psychotraumatic mechanisms that are very well documented. In France, we have a famous researcher. Her name is Muriel Salmona. She has highlighted these mechanisms with victims of sexual violence, how it can be harder to fight for your rights, and you increase your likeliness of being victim again once you have experienced sexual violence for the first time. So anyway, then after this rape, Axel, the fake profile, would apologize to the women, say, "Oh my God, I don't know how this happened. You still need money." Sorry, you still need money. So I will advise you to record a pornography video. This is very safe. This is very confidential. It's for foreign use only. It will only be sent to Canada, will not be shared online, etc. So then the women would go to houses in the countryside, in the middle of nowhere, but they didn't know where they are. They don't know anyone, etc. And some of them would be sequestrated, so locked inside of the houses for a few days. They would be insulted. They would be tortured. They would be raped. The bukkake scenes were particularly violent. So it's scenes where women are in some kind of garage, like some kind of warehouse. And basically on Twitter, on X, the producers, they would share the address, and the pornography consumers, the guys watching the pornography video, they would be able to come. They needed a mask. And so it was sometimes tens, so up to 60 or more men around one woman who would be naked on a pallet, and they would all be masked, and they would collectively rape her, also in the mouth and in the vagina. And then they would all ejaculate on her. And that's what they call the bukkake scene. That's the scenes that made the platform very famous, right? And so that was, of course, very traumatizing. There is one of the victims who is testifying that she was raped more than 80 times in 2 hours, which, of course, for us, it amounts to torture. So that's something that we can speak maybe later on about the link with torture, because that's something we're trying to push a lot in France. But basically, to go back to the sexual exploitation and trafficking, these methods of deception, of manipulation, and then amounting to violence, with the platform taking advantage of it and making money out of it, it corresponds to the definition of trafficking from and sexual exploitation from the Palermo Protocol. We have also examples with the pornography industry of transnational trafficking with, for instance, in Latin America, what is called the Zona Diva case, which was a case where there was fake advertisement for modeling jobs. And actually, there was trafficking of about 2,000 women from different countries in Latin America. They were brought to houses where they were again sequestrated, and the videos were filmed, videos of sexual violence, videos of rape. And then once one video is filmed, they can blackmail the women into staying through telling them that the videos will be shared with their families or so on. They would do the same to their sister, or, blackmailing them into recording more and more videos. So yeah, there is a strong link between prostitution and trafficking. And what's more is that when you look at the content on pornography platform, and I'm speaking about the very mainstream, the biggest pornography platform like Pornhub, Xhamsters, which most of them are owned by the same company, by the way, which is based in Canada. It's called MindGeek. If you look at this content, there is now a lot of documentation highlighting that the majority of this content is violent. So, for instance, in France, we have 2 reports, one by the French Senate and one by the High Council of Equality Between Women and Men, which shows that 90% of the content highlights violence against women. And in the majority of this content, women respond to violence with pleasure as well. And the point that I'm making with this is that a lot of the content that is on pornography platform is already illegal. And if you take this video and you put it in any other context, videos of torture, videos of physical violence, videos that do the apology of incest or racism or pedocriminality, they are illegal. It's not normal to have this kind of content online. However, because it's on pornography platform and because pornography platforms are huge, it's 1/3 of the content of the internet, there is no capacity for the law enforcement to deal with this content. And so it's just there. And we say it's a zone of non-application of the law, because we don't even need new laws basically to fight the content of the pornography industry. We would just need for the existing laws, international and national law, to be enforced. And then the majority already of the content of the platforms would be deleted.
Okay, wow. I'm listening to you, and there's like really a lot of thoughts in my head from really disturbing information you shared. Like, for example, pornography takes 1/3 of the internet. This is really massive, and I feel like a society, us, we don't realize. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point you're making, because there is a paradox with pornography that it's everywhere, it's omnipresent. Again, it's 1/3 of the content on the internet, but it also irrigates all of our lives, right? Because some codes of pornography are taken also in advertisement, in movies, in music. There is a pornographic culture that we live in. But on the same side, on the other side, there is a taboo around pornography and around sexuality in general, where people don't really want to talk about it. When we want to promote sexuality education in most countries, there is a backlash. Some parents that are worried that if we speak about sexuality with their children, it would be, dangerous for them. But actually, most people don't realize that now that children have smartphones from the age of 9, the average age of being a consumer of pornography is decreasing. Now we have between 60 and 90%, according to the data in France by IFOP. 60 to 90 children under the age of 15 who have been exposed to pornography.
It's really big.
It's a very big number, knowing that, one pornographic image, watching one video, it can already have an impact on your mental health and the development of your sexuality models, etc. And it has, of course, an impact on the relationship between women and men and boys and girls. Because of the image of women that is portrayed in pornography. So, yeah, it's very complicated on the one hand to have this pornography that is everywhere, and the other hand to kind of refuse or have this blockage about addressing what is sexuality, what it should be, what are the questions that children may have, what is violence. Because now we have a confusion between sexuality and violence. This is something that I always say. I think it's one of our most main problems in society today. Is if you look at a TV show or a book like 50 Shades of Grey or something like that, there is a romanticization that is very, very present in pornography, erotization and romanticization of violent behavior. So bondage, slapping, collective rape, like there are these words now. You don't say collective rape, you say gangbang. You don't say strangulation, you say choking, or the words. There are these new words to kind of glamorize the violence. And so there are some studies also highlighting that for teenagers, there is a normalization of some sexual practices, such as sodomy, for instance, or having sex with several people, which, of course, for teenagers would increase the likeliness of experiencing violence. But it's all blurry now, because how would you recognize this is a situation of violence when it's actually in all of the content that you watch, this is presented as something very normal and very even pleasurable? And then there is a taboo in addressing this. So you don't really have access to sexuality education. Most children don't speak about these issues with their parents either. So it's very paradoxical and very dangerous, because if the only access to sexuality education is pornography is not sexuality education. It's really not. It's just there to make money. So the economic model of the pornography industry is like YouTube or TikTok, or it's the amount of views. The more views you have on a video, the more money you will get. And so they need to have content that is more and more shocking, more and more extreme, in order for the clicks to be higher and therefore to make money. This is their only purpose, right? It's not like the general interest. They're not, the Ministry of Education. They are private actors that are seeking to make profit. So we cannot rely on them for sexuality education. I'm saying this because I often hear this, especially when it comes to LGBT. Some advocates of pornography highlighting, no, but this is sexuality education. It shows different models of sexuality that are not very mainstream, etc. This is not true. If you look at pornography platform, the majority of the content would be very, very harmonized. It's always about male sexuality. It's often based on violence, degrading women, humiliation. It's about ejaculation. Female pleasure is almost completely absent from there. And also bodies are very, how do you say, standardized. Although glamorized. It's not really diverse, actually, if you look at it.
Yeah. Because me too, I've heard, and I've seen that, position that, pornography can be a tool, to teach about sexuality, to discover yourself, to gain, confidence, all that, and it completely didn't make sense, and listening to you, it feels like, okay, in the society, we're just doing all the wrong steps, like,
yeah. It's just, again, kind of the similar argument that we hear about prostitution, right? Like, it's super empowering. Women and even sometimes girls should do this because it will liberate your sexuality and your power, etc. But why?
And provides income.
Yeah, it provides income. But actually, we're only hearing this when it comes to women and girls. No one is saying that it's super empowering for boys or men to sell themselves and, experience, like, become an object of being bought and sold in order to be empowered. It is extremely biased. And if you look at the reality of the trauma, the physical and mental health consequences for the women who have experienced commercial sexual exploitation, both in prostitution and pornography, it's really, really deep. You have dissociation, you have depression, isolation, you have problems with your urination, you can have cancer, you can have your skin burned because of the ejaculation on the skin, you can have organs that are descending from your anus or your vagina. You have very, very, very serious health issues. Some women also commit suicide, become dependent to drugs, etc. So this is another common trait about prostitution and pornography, right? Is also the consequences on the victims. And sometimes, so there is a report by Melissa Farley that conducted interviews in Sweden with victims of commercial pornography. And she highlights that sometimes it's even more traumatizing for the victims than prostitution. So some victims she interviewed, they did both prostitution and pornography. That's another thing. It's very intertwined. A lot of the victims also of the French Bukake trials, they were exploited in prostitution and pornography and vice versa. But anyway, these women, some of them are saying that pornography is worse because the violence is filmed. And so there is this aspect of re-victimization that once the video is on the internet, it's impossible to take it away. Sometimes it would disappear from one website, it would appear on another. With the women, my organization is giving support to with the trials. It's called Osez le féminisme. We're supporting the women of the trial from a legal perspective, but also social and psychotraumatic support. And basically, we've been knocking at all the doors, right? Google, Arcom, which is a authority in France that is dealing with the content on the internet, Pharos, which relates to the Ministry of the Interior, and they also work on the regulation of online content. We're trying everything, but it's impossible to have the videos go away. And some of them are being recognized in the streets, so they are being attacked or insulted. Some of them are scared that their families or their employers will see the videos. Some of them are blackmailed online. So they receive messages by men saying, okay, if you don't give me money, or if you don't do that for me, or if you don't send me a naked picture of yourself, I will share these videos with your employer, with your boyfriend, because I found your address and blah, blah, blah. So it's extremely complicated for them. Some of them call it a social death. So the consequences, they go beyond the trauma of experiencing violence. It's like the violence is starting over and over again every day, as long as these videos exist and they are public.
I remembered another interesting, I don't know if it's correct to call it a fact, but, at some point, when experts, when, activists, feminists started talking about, the harms of pornography and etc., and emerged all that, the opposition who was saying, like, oh, okay, so it can be helpful for you developing your sexuality, etc., etc. And there came up such a, kind of term, a new type of pornography called ethical pornography, which was basically saying, that this is, ethical. People do it voluntarily. It's done completely different. Like, can you share anything about this aspect of pornography?
Well, so for me, this is a false argument because, again, looking at the majority of the industry, this is not what we see. And again, going back to the economic model, pornography is a lot of money, right? Every second there is over $3,000 spent on pornography in the world. So that's every second. And again, the majority of the platforms, what they would want is a race for clicks in order to get more and more views. The issue with ethical pornography, or so-called ethical pornography, or we hear also feminist pornography or something like that. First of all, as long as it involves actual people, that's the difference also between pornography and cinema. It's real people who are shown on the videos. So you have no way to ensure the protection of the person on the set, because as long as there is a sexual relationship and the consent is bought, it is sexual exploitation, and you're making money out of it. It is sexual exploitation. The definition of rape, some people say rape is sex without consent. I disagree with this. For me and for us as a feminist organization, if there is no desire for the sex, the consent can be can be manipulated in many ways, right? You can consent to something because your consent is being bought, or because you're afraid of the repercussion. You can consent to having sex with your boss because you don't want to be fired, or with your landlord because you don't want to be kicked out on the streets. And that's actually what happens a lot in patriarchal society, because women are put in a situation where they are more vulnerable than men, and they are dependent on men in many cases. So consent alone cannot be enough to define what sexual violence is.
It's not a real consent.
It's not a real consent, exactly. And so the definition of rape should be based on the behavior of the perpetrator and which kind of vulnerability factors he used to manipulate the consent. Because actually, in most cases, there will be this fake, not valid consent of the victim. Anyway, in the cases of pornography, it would be like that, right? You have signed a contract, you have consented to something. So it's almost impossible for you to say no, to say stop. And when you watch the video, you have no way of knowing whether this person knew what she was getting into and whether she accepted everything that happened. So that's the first thing. As long as it's real people doing real acts in front of the camera, it cannot be ethical and it cannot be feminist. Second thing is that, this kind of so-called ethical pornography, again, it's milder content. That's what you usually find on the mainstream platforms. And so the issue is also because the age of exposition to pornography is younger and younger, there will be escalating effects, which is also linked with mental health process and developing addiction to pornographic content. Because you attach watching pornography with pleasure, because you masturbate while watching pornography and it's, associated with something pleasurable, then you can develop an addiction or form of addiction to it, especially if you're watching from a young age. And so if you do so, you will become numb to the milder content that you're watching, and you'll be seeking for new content and more extreme content, right? And you will also be exposed to it because, once you're in a pornography platform, you will get links from other content and you will be exposed to different things. Another argument against this ethical porn is that sometimes it's just a marketing argument from the pornography industry. So we see this also with amateur porn. Amateur porn is often highlighted as it's consenting adults. And there is no one taking advantage of anyone else. There is no pimp, no producer. So it's more acceptable. However, in the cases that I was describing to you in France, so we have actually another proceeding against a pornography platform that is very famous. It's called Jackie et Michel. However, the investigation is not over yet. So the trial is not yet planned. However, this platform is supposed to be amateur porn platform. However, the preliminary stages of the investigation already highlighted that actually the same producers that were working with French Bukake, some of them were also working with Jackie and Michel, and most of the content there was actually, like classical producer hiring, someone to film rather than amateur porn. And so it's presented like this, but actually it's a marketing argument for the company to say, look, it's consenting adults, it's all fine, there's no exploitation going on, but it's actually not true. And so this is the risk also with so-called feminists, or the type of pornography, is that platforms would go around, having a few videos that are more acceptable and hiding behind this, basically saying, look, we are developing ethical pornography, we are doing things differently. But if you look at the reality of what they do to make money, it's not this. And the last thing I would say is that, in my personal opinion, a kind of pornography that would exist that would be more acceptable would be something that doesn't involve actual people. So it could be, animated or something like that. But something like the very big nuance that I need to put into this is the content. Because there is one thing about the exploitation of actual women and the very real life consequences that they suffer. But there is also the consequence of pornography on society as a whole. And that's what I was developing earlier, right? Watching content that dehumanize women and treat them as objects and humiliate them. It has consequences on the reproduction of violence by, children, teenagers, and also adults. And so pornography can never be ethical or feminist if it's based on this model. It would be something about rethinking completely the way sexuality is portrayed in these content. And I am thinking this is not going to make a lot of money for the people who do that. And so that's why platforms are not interested in this.
Yeah, actually, that's what I wanted you to ask about how it leads to the sensitization to violence and reduce empathy to victims of violence, of sexual violence, of rape.
Add on this, we have a study conducted by IFOP from 2023 in France that actually looks at the impacts of watching pornography on the rape culture. And basically, they ask questions to women, to men, and to men who watched pornography since the age of 11. And they ask them, for instance, do you think that when you have a relationship with them, many women say no, but what they actually means is yes. And so women would say, yes, I think this is true at 9%. Men of the regular population would say this is true at 16%. But men who watch pornography since 11 years old, 45% of them would think this is true. And this is one example, but they do this for other, statements that relate to rape culture. So for instance, we have also, if you are having sex with someone, you don't have to ask them before embarking in a new sexual practice. So here, almost 60% of men who watch pornography since 11 years old, they think this is true, versus only 25% of men who have not watched pornography. So it's very striking, the impact on the representation of sexuality by men who have watched pornography from a young age.
I wonder also, how pornography, I mean, for you and for me, it's pretty known, and probably for many people in pornography, you can find all sorts of groups. And even when the war against Ukraine started, after very quickly there was released, numbers that in Pornhub, the biggest search number was of Ukrainian girls, Ukrainian women, which was very shocking, but also nothing really new in pornography. There are certain groups that are targeted, how it affects women of certain ethnicities and certain looks.
Yeah, absolutely. So in pornography, you have a categorization of women based on their ethnicities. So you have ebony, for instance, for Black women, you have Asian. Each of the ethnicities is associated with specific stereotypes. Is very colonial. For instance, for Arab women, you would have a lot of staging of the videos around veiling, putting away the veil, or raping a woman who is veiled, etc. And this is very important when you look at the targeting of victims. When I was saying the producers, they target specific women for these videos, they would look at women who are racialized as well. And so on top of the sexist stereotypes and the rape culture that pornography is propagating, it's also propagating racist stereotypes. And like you said, this has very real consequences. So there are reports from Europol that highlights that after the invasion of Ukraine, because of the demand, so there was this increased demand on pornography platforms for Ukrainian content. The trafficking network, they targeted Ukrainian women specifically. And so this just increased the risks of exploitation for Ukrainian women and girls. So it's not only them, of course. There is this dynamic at the scale of the world that in the countries that are the poorest, the living conditions are the most vulnerable. There may be war, there may be natural disasters as well. Women are being displaced, etc. All of these factors, poverty as well, it always increases the risk of women sexual exploitation, whether that is in prostitution or pornography. It's actually, that's what I've been saying since the beginning of this podcast. It's actually the same. It's one single system that is intertwined, and pornography is just like another face of it that is more acceptable for society, apparently for some reasons, although prostitution is also very accepted and legal in many countries. But yeah, it's two faces on the same coin, basically. And on top of racism and misogyny. You have also a lot of incest and child sexual abuse on this pornography platform. So you have all tag categories such as schoolgirl, teen, etc. that really directly
Stepsister,
etc. Father, daughter, things like this. So also normalizing incest, which we know is a very prevalent issue in society. The number from the Council of Europe highlight that 1 out of 5 children in Europe are victims of sexual violence, and this is something that is really not criminalized effectively. There is a lot of taboo around it. Victims are not identified. It's extremely complicated, and so having a whole bunch of websites that in all impunity normalize this behavior is extremely harmful as well. If you look at the titles, so I was mentioning the report on pornography from the High Council of Equality between Women and Men in France, which is dated 2023. It lists some of the titles of the videos in the main platforms. And it's like tens of videos have the word torture in it. You have videos where you have the word Nazi. It refers to the Holocaust. It refers to war. It refers to slavery. Also, sometimes there are staging around slavery. It's basically taking all of the worst of human history and sexualizing it and normalizing it in these platforms. It's extremely problematic.
Listen to you, I was thinking, yeah, just like you said, all of that connects: pornography, prostitution, trafficking, digital violence, which is also now we're having more conversation about it. And it's really connecting to that too, because pornography is digital violence when your partner or ex-boyfriend, shares, secretly filmed video, or someone just secretly films, I don't know, you in Airbnb, and then place on the internet, and after manipulates you, or just place it on the internet. It's the same digital violence, or shares with friends, etc., a boyfriend of his girlfriend in high school, all of that, and we don't really realize how harmful it is. And of course the victim will be blamed the most. But I want to ask you, with all that horrific content and reality of pornography, which I feel like is completely not tackled in the society at all, I'm hearing a lot of your referrals to friends and the actions you're doing in there. And I'm thinking at the same time, okay, in Lithuania, it's completely, blank. We are so far from even what you are doing in there and friends. But what do we actually is there any ways to really combat it, besides, what's already being done, how to work with society, to really make a change?
Yeah, I think it will be very long, just because right now it's so accepted that it's part of freedom of expression, it's part of sexual liberty, etc. So I think what we need to do is, first of all, take the platforms to court, what we are doing in France, what's been going on also in the States, in other countries, to hold them accountable. And we need to advocate at EU level and UN level for more accountability of the platforms and the internet service providers. Just because this is a transnational problem, because it's very easy for the platforms to just, move how do you say, leur siège social, move their offices from one country to another, to get the most liberating legislations. Also, there are smoke screens. There are ways for them to, make it hard to understand where the content is coming from, etc. So there needs.
And now with AI.
Yeah, with AI is even worse. I wanted to follow up on what you were saying about the deep fakes and, all of these kind of new forms of violence against women that are emerging, that are being used, especially artificial intelligence, to silence women online, to humiliate them. This is very linked with pornography, and you have all sections on pornography websites that are related to this, and also related to some specific forms of violence, such as revenge porn or upskirting, the taking of pictures under someone's skirt, or, filming someone without their knowledge. And because this is the staging of the video, if it's done for real, like it's actually someone who didn't know, it's not pretending, it's someone who was filmed without their knowledge, or someone took a picture under their skirts and they don't even know this is online. You have no way of knowing. Again, you're watching something, you don't know whether this is, so-called consensual, blah, 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 or if this is an actual crime that you're just masturbating to. So this is very problematic. So what I was saying is that we definitely need transnational responses. We are right now, Osez le féminisme and the French coordination for the European Women's Lobby, which I'm the president of. We're organizing an international conference in February in Strasbourg, gathering MEPs, UN agencies, etc., to discuss these issues that we presented today, and to discuss especially concrete solutions. The issue that we have is that right now at European level, there is an understanding that the EU institutions wants to work with pornography platform. Like they are making voluntary code of conducts. The European Commission almost participated in a pornography festival, and the mobilization of feminist organizations stopped it. But basically the idea is like to have some kind of partnership with, criminal platform, which are making money out of illegal content. So it's a deep lack of understanding of what the reality of pornography is. And we need to shift completely this narrative and this perspective.
Are they also doing partnership with pimps?
Yes, exactly. It's crazy. You wouldn't see that in other, criminal areas, right? It's like, oh, we need to fight money laundering, or we need to find, like drug trafficking. So
let's partner with mafia.
Exactly. Let's work hand in hand with the cartels. And that will not be possible, right?
And make ethical cocaine.
Exactly. Make ethical code of conducts for drug trafficking. So it's completely crazy. And I wanted to give also the example of age control. So, it seems kind of obvious that we would need to at least make the content not accessible for children. And this is something that in France, some lawmakers have been trying to do for several years. However, this is blocked by the European Commission because they considered that this is an infraction to the freedom of competition between businesses in Europe. So there is a directive called e-commerce. And so it is not compatible with this directive specifically. And so what we need to do is to completely shift this culture and to highlight pornography as an issue of public health, of equality between women and men especially, but also equality and non-discrimination in general, versus something that has to do with business and, competition between businesses, etc. So this is a big job that we have to do. And especially, I don't think we are really going in the right direction right now, but things can really change really quickly as well. We know historically, especially in France, big trials, very important trials have led to legislative changes. For instance, criminalization of rape in France. It was in the context of trial, the Bobigny trial, that was led by Gisèle Halimi, who was a very famous feminist lawyer. Same with the abortion, the legalization of abortion was also linked with the big trial, also with Gisèle Halimi, by the way. She's kind of my idol. But maybe, it's also a snowball effect. So maybe if we manage to get something out of these trials that are going on in France, it can have a positive repercussion also in the rest of the world. That's what we hope as well. We have to keep going, right? As feminists, we're used to have mountains in front of us and to know that our fight will take several generations, but we have to start somewhere.
I really hope that someone, from Lithuania will hear this conversation from decision makers and will be okay. Let's take a positive example of France tackling big issues. And I think that's many countries that could use that example, even though, it's not perfect in France, and it's full of, issues in there that you named alone, plenty of them in this conversation. But at least you are, doing something, towards that, because sometimes I feel like we are very behind with all of it. The mindset, the position, but not realization of how deep is the problem and how it's connected with violence against women, with misogyny, with machismo culture, with pornography, with prostitution, trafficking, digital violence, all the package in there. It's really wild. But it's only that far we can go. And I think, like stopping would make it only, continue growing worse and worse. And going on and doing something. It's like the least we can do, even though it's moving forward in a positive way, really, really, really slowly. But that's all we can do for now. Anyways, thank you, Alyssa. It was very interesting to hear a lot of information, but I think it's very important and crucial. And I really hope so that people who will listen really will take a different, point of view to the pornography, because I think, like you mentioned, really key points. And I know that by now it's a weird way to maybe to say, but you are an expert on the issue of pornography. So yeah.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It was really nice speaking with you about this. I hope also that the people who will be listening, they ask themselves questions and maybe they dig into this as well.
Thank you, Alyssa, for a very informative conversation. For our listeners, I really hope that you enjoyed and you learned something new and hopefully can use even in your own life, in your own work field, to apply to improve and change the society that we're living in, to change people's mindsets so there would be less violence, less sexual exploitation and abuse. If you enjoyed this dialogue, do not hesitate to share it on your social media or with your friends. And I also want to invite you to listen to our other conversations and dialogues that are both in English and for those who speak Lithuanian, in Lithuanian as well. Thank you and see you in the next season.